Welcome back to Develop Lex. Today we have a little bit different of a format. Some of you that are listening to this podcast may have been at the in-person event, but we are doing this event live at Eppings. This is something that we would like to do to kind of introduce some of our guests to people that listen. We've said it over and over, a lot of the value of our podcast is the fact that we know people that are prominent in Lexington. At least we don't necessarily contribute a ton of value outside of asking good questions sometimes. So today we are doing a live event at Eppings. Chad Walker and Chad Needham are joining us, and we are going to be talking about things that are relevant in Lexington right now. We actually have a list of those things, and you guys also get to see the trick to the trade of we do have questions that we go off of, and I read them verbatim sometimes. So we are going to go through a list of questions, but we have a few topics that are relevant to Lexington today, and the two guys that we have on are what I would be considering as infill developers. You guys have done a great job of doing what the city of Lexington has tasked us to do, which is take areas of Lexington that maybe haven't had as much attention historically and made them a lot better. So we thought we would talk to you guys in particular. Also, you're very likable, so that's always good for the podcast. So first off, in the case that whoever is listening, whether it be in the audience or live, does not know you guys yet, if you could give like a 40-second intro to who you are and what you do to kind of set the scene, that would be amazing. So Chad Needham, Chad Walker, I'll go. Also both Chad, so that's a little bit confusing. So I'll go Needham first.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just a local infill developer. I've done multiple projects, just really in the north fringe of downtown. It was really the area that was able to just seemed affordable to me in the time, and I haven't really gone too far. I mean, I've probably gone 5-6 blocks in the last 17 years. So it's, but really, I got into it. My first building was where Arcadium and Favor is, and was able to get that one turned around, and it just kind of grew from there really organically. And so I've used local banks and very localized. And so that's really been the focus of my last 17 years is right in that area. So, but I'm from the north side of Lexington, so I felt comfortable, in that area. I went to really Russell Cave, Winburn, Bryan Station, Trancey. So I can talk north side if you want to talk north side. And we've, I've just been able to pick off a few key properties and some corners and really be involved in the neighborhood and kind of get these great buildings that really were forgotten about and needed. I mean, 90% of everything I've done's been vacant. So we really try to take the vacant properties and bring them back into the fabric of the neighborhood and do that in a way that, is obviously a community-minded, forward thinking, but also just repairing kind of where the neighborhood kind of needs some help.
Love it. Go Defenders. All right. Chad Walker.
Same, exactly the same. It's really similar. So yeah, and thank you guys for having us. This is absolutely awesome. We're big fans of Develop Lex, and I'm actually fans of this stuff that Chad's doing. It's beautiful that he's been able to do, especially Gray Line Station. So my father, this was absolutely an accident. He's a commercial electrician by trade. The first property he bought in this neighborhood was the 333 North Ashland site, which is where Seasons Catering is now. And the reason he bought the properties on either side was they were run-down piece of junk properties that nobody else wanted. So he bought those, fixed them up, and guess what? On the other side of those were run-down piece of junk property. So it was sort of a nice, lucky accident. It was infill prior to anybody calling it infill. And really similar, just trying to reactivate this neighborhood. Mintel, Kenwick, and Belcourt are all beautiful. They were already finished and stabilized, and really this was the last piece of the puzzle. And once it kind of came online, those folks supported us wholeheartedly, and they have ever since. It's been a wonderful synergy to have those neighborhoods be involved, but also to support like local businesses. I'm looking around the room. We see Joe in the back with Void Sake. Like each one of those is a very unique thing. You can't get that anywhere else other than right here. and there's things at Gray Line you can't get anywhere else. So, yeah, that's just a really neat thing.
So with development, it's never a simple.
Yeah, it just got serious.
Cue the dum dum
Dum, dum, dum. Chad Needham, that was not 40 seconds, so we're going to cut you off next time.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So development's never a straight line. Complexities come even with vacant properties. It's financing, it's planning and zoning, it's neighbor relations, it's surprise that you find when you start knocking down a wall or trying to build up something. What are some of the projects you've worked on that you get to the glorious day of cutting a big ribbon with some big scissors, but you're like, if everybody just saw that? Walk us through some of those war stories.
Oh, I mean, I think, everyone has been a war story. There's nothing that we haven't, done that has not needed almost a full gut and remodel from the get-go. Typically, the worst building in the neighborhood is the one that seems to fall in my hands. And it, yeah, I mean, you gotta, I guess, like the process. And the process is not that exciting. I mean, it's very hands-on, from just getting it under roof is important, but then it's, fascia and soffit and box gutters typically in these old buildings, and they're not easy to rebuild. And then, from brick to foundations to, everything in the middle. So you have to tear it all kind of out. Most of them, because they've been vacant for so long, or, there's a lot of mold. There's a lot of, I think Arcadium had maybe 40 pigeons living in it, and I couldn't even get them out. I mean, they would never leave. So, I mean, and that really, those type of projects, after several years, you get a little better at them. And the first one I thought it would take 6 months, and very naive, it took 1.5 years. And my first tenant didn't pay rent for 8 months. So, I mean, those are the challenges with it. But, again, today we've got some great tenants, and I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing now without them. But, from Arcadium down to Gray Line was probably the first big project, or the first big project that I was able to do. And that was, you walk in and it's just a disaster. It's amazing that that Lextran owned it and really left it in that condition for so long. But, you're into that project 2+ years before you even see your first tenant. And so it's a long time. And, now we're working on the one that, in the corner of Short and Upper, right downtown next to Traditional Bank and across from the old courthouse. And, that one we touch, and it just, everything we touch falls apart. So, I mean, I feel like I blame 21C because they've kind of pushed all the buildings my way, and I'm right at the end. So I'm just trying to hold on. So if it ends up in Short Street, it's 21C's problem, fault, not problem, my problem, their fault. But yeah, I mean, that's a big one. It's going to be a great adaptive reuse project. It's got retail, bringing new retail to the corner. We had to dig out the entire basement and put new foundations in it, and that was a large, big ask for last year. It's one of those projects where everyone always asks you, when are you going to get it done? And I just don't know when it'll get done.
When are you going to get it done?
I don't know. Hopefully by the end of the year, but that'll probably be more like before Keeneland, really. But I'm trying to push to the end of the year. But we've been working inside for the last year, and now we're kind of starting on the outside. But as you said, I'm going to maybe stop at my 40 seconds.
Can I interject real quick? I guess you were done. Everybody probably in this room knows this. Development's hard. I think you just touched on it. Gutting and remodeling old buildings are hard. I think sometimes what gets lost in translation is sometimes the people on our podcast may speak and it might feel like they're removed from like the nitty gritty. They're not. I have seen leaving my office, like we're talking like 5:15 p.m. on a Friday, Chad sitting on the side of that building, like covered in dirt with like 6 other people that had just dug out the basement together. So it's hard. Like what you're doing is hard. And so I do commend you on that. It's definitely, I think some people want to get into real estate development or flipping houses or commercial property or whatever. They don't maybe understand that you are there on a Friday night with the people that you're working with digging out a basement. Maybe not everybody does that, but you do that.
Yeah, I think you lean into the hard. I mean, whatever you do in life. And when it's, these old buildings really have created an opportunity for me. I don't have this, I've looked at all these other people that have been on your podcast. I don't have this great vision. I just have I'm probably a little naive to each project about what it's going to take. But in the end, you just got to finish it and get it done and find great tenants. And people do like the history of the old buildings. They do like seeing it. And so that is rewarding as well.
Craftsmen Contractors is Central Kentucky's one-stop shop for roofing, windows, siding, and gutters. CraftsmenContractors.com/contact us will get you straight to the form you need so that their team will get in touch about your project. Or just text Steven at 859-246-0108. When they finish your project, windows, siding, gutters, or roofing, you'll see what they mean when they say we build with integrity.
So speaking of day to day, Chad Walker's office, I'm not gonna blast you too much, but your office is right around the corner, so you're very much in the weeds day to day. But same question that Ross asked regarding just a project. Oh, good. This is what you guys don't see typically. Maybe phrase the question again to Chad Walker.
I'd like to say I'm pretty sure I've called Chad Walker before, and he picks up second ring, and he goes, "Hey, what's going on?" And he's, "Oh, I'm just in a crawl space right now." So it must just be a developer thing, is roofs and crawl spaces and
somewhat. Chad and I are both nuts and bolts guys, and nobody ever calls us with like, "Hey, we're doing a beer sampling thing down at this brewery. Come down." It's always the worst god awful job of like, you need to crawl on a roof and you need to make sure you're wearing an insulated suit, and we get called for the worst stuff. You asked for about the projects that were tough, and this is like a dirty jobs episode. It's like a support group here, but all of them, every one of them has some level of like, oh God, I can't believe I just did that. And I'm so glad it's over. And I shouldn't tell this story, but like this very room, when the previous tenant was in this building, my wife, Jill, and I cleaned out what they left off. And it was like Pompeii, you guys, like they left everything where it was, just vacated. And so we were weeks cleaning it out. And yes, you look at the finished product now, and it's beautiful and it's lovely, but I see these echoes of like, oh God, that's where we had to clean that out, or that's where we had to clean this out. And it's like that for the whole neighborhood. It's wonderful to see the end product, and the tenants have been great, and they're very accommodating. But yeah, there's not a single day that goes by. And we were talking about before we went on is, how many times do you change in the course of a day? Like, well, I changed like 3 times. Like, well, I changed 4. It's just what you do. You know what I mean? Like, that's what you have to do to keep it going. And we're both very accessible, and that's part of just the way we are, is you got to be accessible. It's not easy, but at the end of the day, you kind of have to have a little bit of a love and passion for keeping these old buildings and things like that. And yeah, I could tell awful stories all day long, but pretty much wall to wall, every single one of them is rough in some capacity. They don't call us when everything's like perfect and it all wrapped up exactly the way you guys envisioned. Nope, never happens that way. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's having a vision. Both of you said you don't have a vision as much. I think you do have a very good vision. I think the thing that, and a reason that we really enjoy Develop Lex is we do get to maybe uncover some of the things that actually go on day to day as a developer. But we also wanted to shine a light on we need more projects like you all are doing in the city of Lexington. And so hopefully somebody in this room gets excited. It's not going to be me in the crawl space. I hate crawl space. I'm not cave cricket's not my thing. But hopefully somebody in the room or somebody listening can get excited about doing more projects that the city needs, like you all are doing. So there are a lot of unique challenges that infill redevelopers have in particular. And we're going to talk about some of those things. What would you say in terms of doing a project right in the middle of a neighborhood, maybe dealing with zoning challenges or environmental, or what? Is there anything that jumps off the page of, I want to be an infill redeveloper. I want to take this downtown property and make it better. What would you say is as a unique challenge that somebody should be aware of as somebody that does infill redevelopment?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the bigger challenges in any old building is one, how you get it. If there's existing tenants, typically but the short and upper building had existing tenants. And so it's been difficult to work around that. So you have to navigate that. Their leases, typically these landlords have held buildings for, 20, 30, 40 years if they're going to come off of them, or it's the second or third generation that has them. So they typically don't want to do much with them or spend any money. So getting them in that shape is tough. I mean, unique challenges. You're going to have to deal with, ADA codes. You're going to have to deal with, bringing it up to code. And that is not easy always. I think we love the old buildings. They give you great exposed brick and they give you these fantastic, 200 to 300 year old beams. Unfortunately, now the brick can stay, but if you're creating different units, you have to create a fire separation, and that's just drywall. It's usually 2 sheets, sometimes 3. Unfortunately, those things get expensive and they kind of take away a little bit of the charm of it. But working through, probably all the infrastructure of you're on sidewalks. There's usually one water line. You need to bring in 16. You've got backflow preventers. You've got new gas lines. You've got new electric. That stuff takes a minute.
And so besides the sticks and bricks, you had an interesting zoning, a new tenant that was going to come into Gray Line that
Correct.
Then triggered a new zone. Walk through some of that kind of stuff and how zoning and future zodas
so the
and
zoning
things
part.
like that.
You need to figure, usually we, buy B1, B2A, B4 buildings. There's typically what's in those retail corridors. Occasionally get an I1. In COVID, we had several tenants that decided to pivot their business. I'll use Thrive Kombucha as one. And Elijah's a hardworking entrepreneur, and he started canning his product and selling it at Good Foods Co-op and a few other of the specialty grocery stores. And he just we get a letter in the mail that says, or he got one that says, you're out of zoning compliance. And you're like, what? And so I read the letter and I call down to planning and they're like, yeah, Chad, he started canning. I'm like, okay. They're like, well, he's not I1. And I thought, you're picking on the small guy here. So, that was challenging time because, at COVID, you pivot, you try to do whatever you're to do to keep your business going. And so I felt really challenged to kind of, help Elijah. So we went and rezoned, all of Gray Line just to accommodate him there. And that was not easy, but we were able to do it. And I do think that was a win with planning because I think they understood that and understood where we were coming from and trying to support our tenants. And he was able to pivot, and we've got him a great new location over on the Gray Line and at Gray Line. And it's, it's one of those, you go after, you help him out. It really meant a lot. And he's been a tenant now, for probably 6-7 years, and he just signed another 5-year lease. So those are the little wins that you can do, I think, to help tenants really get their business. Because ultimately, they have to be successful in order for you to be successful. You're the kind of the last person there to get the money. And yes, you've got the long-term, debt pay down, but you got they have to meet the needs every month of their family to ultimately afford their rents and pay their bills. So that's really what you're doing. You're helping small businesses get started.
Develop Lex is sponsored by SV & Stone Commercial Real Estate, a full-service commercial real estate firm located in Lexington, Kentucky, affiliated with the SVN International Network, which is comprised of over 1,600 advisors and staff and 200-plus offices across the globe. The SV & Stone team consists of experienced commercial real estate advisors in the heart of the Bluegrass. SVN provides commercial real estate services to large corporations, middle market businesses, and individual entrepreneurial investors. Serving the greater Lexington area, SVN offers advisory services for sales, leasing, management, and development of commercial properties locally, regionally, and nationally. With transaction volume of over $400 million, the advisors at SVN Stone Commercial Real Estate have vast experience and deep understanding of all aspects of commercial real estate.
I would say, same question, but I think national is an interesting story because this was a bunch of warehouses at one point. What kind of spurred how has that vision kind of come to life, and what does that look like practically?
I think it was accidental. I mean, it really wasn't that we came into it and went, okay, we're going to have coffee shops and retail and things like that. As Chad said, the zoning was limited. This is a B4 zone. It at the time was one of the worst zones. And so under Mayor Gray and specifically Jimmy Emmons, they came up with the adaptive reuse overlay. And the secret part of it is other than the restaurant part, we'd already started kind of twisting and manipulating the zone a little bit to accommodate some of the business we were all doing. So when the adaptive reuse came in, we really didn't change anything. We already had the businesses, but it was working. And I think that was part of the spur to it was, this is already happening. You're definitely out of zone on some of these, but how do we make this where, it still exists? And frankly, at that time, I think planning was more on board with looking at neighborhoods like this, saying it's next to a residential. It really has this symbiotic relationship. Why not let them sort of have the power to decide what works? And if it doesn't work, it's on them. I don't think it's that way anymore. I think it's, forgive me if there's planners here, but it's planning knows best. No, you're not supposed to say that, but it really has become a us and them situation when it really should be everybody. You talk about the zoning specifically, and because Chad dealt with this on the canning side, Mirror Twin wanted to start canning. Great. You can only do that in an I-1 zone. So we had to change the zone for that building. Well, you can't just change the zone for that building. It has to be a big area. Otherwise, it's called spot zoning, and they don't like that. So we had to change it on multiple buildings. Well, then, what I did was reach out to the neighborhood of Belcourt, Kenwick, and Mantell and say, look, all we want to do is let this guy can beer. There's not going to be anything changed. So we met in my office, and I laid down the zoning regs for B4 and the zoning for I-1 and said, mark through anything you don't want. Because right now, B4 allows for tire recapping and retreading. That goes away. Heliports, that goes away. So mark off anything you don't want. Our true intent is just to let these guys can beer that we all like. And that part of it was wonderful to be able to go to planning and say, we're doing a zone change from B4 to I-1, and we have zero opposition. Not one neighbor showed up. It was phenomenal. And that's the way it really should be, especially when you've got a neighborhood that's active and they're also involved. So that was a big win for us. But I think one of the big challenges, at least nowadays, is sort of navigating through the constant barrage of zone changes and the ZODAs and all. It's hard to keep up with.
So let's talk ZODAs for a little bit. No? Okay, let's go. So ZODA is a zoning ordinance text amendment. A little bit of history. Zoning is not something that's been around since the pyramids. It's pretty much the last 100 years. Created from a Supreme Court case. That's where you'll hear Euclidean zoning. But an interesting thing about Lexington is that we have a pretty good trickle of ZODAs that come through. That it's finding ways to accommodate how breweries were a big boom. It used to be, you'd think of massive Anheuser-Busch factory, and now it's more of something like a Mirror Twin. And zoning wasn't caught up to that. So zoning is always going to be a little bit behind what culture is pushing forward. But we have some interesting ZODAs on the books right now. What sticks out to you all on what you're seeing, or can you give us a digest of things in the new comp plan, things that are...
You want to tackle the drive throughs? You want me to?
So yeah, I guess the one that probably affects North Lyme the most is drive-throughs in a B1. Obviously I think that I would, I like that change. If you're trying to create a walkable neighborhood, you don't really want a drive-through in the neighborhood. I mean, but then again, you can see the other side to it, that it is a convenience factor. I think, we have we have some challenges on North Lime to try to create this great corridor. And, yes, you want to appeal to everyone, but I just, for some reason right in there, I feel like we already, the traffic and the ZOTA, I think would help at least the residential component there. I think to me, North Limestone, they changed it from 2 lanes to 2 lanes to 1 lane. And I think that was a great help as well. I think it slowed traffic down a lot. I mean, it needs repaved at the moment, but you're kind of driving in the bike lane to stay out of the trench on the left. But, ultimately, slowing down traffic, I think you added nice, the street shrunk essentially, but then all the residents gained parking and street parking, and then you get a little bit of a center, you're driving down essentially the center of the street. There's a nice bike lane. You get a little bit, you're not as close to all of the buildings, so you kind of can see them. So I think that was a really nice addition. Then you turn around and go up Upper, and it's 2 lanes as fast as you can right downtown. So, hopefully that would change as well. But, drive-throughs would be the biggest thing that we would probably not like to see in a neighborhood we're trying to infill, at least in my opinion. Yeah.
Walker?
We have no drive-through, so I'm neutral on this one. I mean, for the most part, I think what really should happen with any development, and whether it goes to drive-throughs or pedestrian safety, whatever, it sort of laid it back onto the developer or the owner or whatever you want to call to make those changes, to actually care about the neighborhood. And I work down here all the time. I know Chad's, extremely active in his neighborhood. There's things that we do that cost us money, but it's the right thing to do. So we upgraded all the lighting, the LEDs. We did this bulb out here that took almost a year to get in, but we did it. And each one of those things don't make you anything, but it helps with pedestrian safety. It helps with, lighting at night, things like that. So that's going to be the hardest part, is to mandate caring. And I think that's what they're trying to do now, is like push this. Well, you need to really look at this. And if you don't like it, or if you don't really care, then we're going to put these stipulations on you and we'll make you care. And some developers are going to be good. Not all of them are going to be good. Some of them are going to be bad. You try to make it where each one is at least tolerable. But then, at least from our side of the fence, that's what makes, our little piece of the world shine that much more, is obviously these guys care. They're actually making it better, regardless if it makes them money. And I think that's where you have to be.
Develop Lex is also sponsored by Community Trust Bank. Hi there, this is Cam Dacey, Commercial Loan Officer at Community Trust Bank and avid Develop Lex and Middle Tech podcast listener. Community Trust offers a wide variety of home loans, commercial loans, and small business loans to suit your financial needs, as well as mobile banking, internet banking, and bill pay. Their friendly and professional staff would love to assist you at one of their 6 Lexington locations. Community Trust Bank is committed to building communities built on trust. Member FDIC, equal housing lender, subject to credit approval.
Yeah, absolutely. A big push right now, and just something that we would be remiss to not talk about, is urban service boundary. We do kind of get into that almost
don't do that. Chad's running for council.
All right, this is specifically for Needham. No.
I feel like I get sworn in now.
Maybe you don't even have to give an opinion if you don't want, but what would you say is the goal of urban service boundary expansion from a developer's perspective? And do you see that affecting positively or negatively some of the projects that you're working on?
Hot takes only, 40-second max.
Okay. I think the goal of the urban service boundary is obviously our biggest issue at the moment is affordable housing. So, if it can increase the single family residential homes, it seems like would increase now, and hopefully that would, help supply and prices might come down. So what I've seen, some of those nodules with retail and then housing around it, I think that seems logical and a nice way to develop the area. So, again, I'm not running for council, so it doesn't matter. I can say whatever I want.
I'm not gonna. Yeah,
You're not going there. All right,
I'm not gonna.
So Chad told me to say. No. He wants to be the developer for all of those properties. No, I'm just kidding. So he's going to try to get that contract, and this is how politics works. He's just going to go and get that, and then just hold all for himself and be this rich guy.
I heard
We're all
it was a
"God,
horse
how'd he
farm
pull it
too.
off?" What's that?
I heard it was a horse farm that he was developing too.
Yeah,
that's it.
yeah.
Kill all the horses.
So I don't know. I mean, I'm for growth, but yes, I'm also for infill. For me personally, I think it's selfish to say that, if it doesn't grow, then my properties are worth so much more. I mean, I don't really believe in that. I mean, we're commercial properties. I mean, you ask Clarence, I would say, is my property worth more? And he would say, Chad, what's your rent? And I would tell him, and he's like, no, it's still worth the same, based on the income you're bringing in. So, I think Lexington has got to grow, but how it grows, either grows up or it grows out. It'd be nice to have a happy medium. I mean, we were sitting on the Board of Adjustments for several years. I was on there for 8 years, and we saw the soccer program, LSC, try to come in and find some different places, and it was difficult, and that was a little frustrating for me. I thought we did a good job realizing all the input and made a decision that we would allow them, to develop on Anderson's property out on north of Lexington, between Russell Cave and Newtown, and that seemed reasonable, really. It's going to some development's going to happen out there anyway, but where they ended up is, we were able to okay that too, and I felt good about both those decisions. So there's a lot of areas within the development or within Lexington that could be redeveloped in a good way. I would have loved to seen it downtown.
I don't remember much about that decision because one of the guys that came in showed a picture of his horse that was injured because it was chasing a balloon, and he cast like a 3-foot or 3-story high video, and Raquel remembers this, of a horse that had a ripped open. And of course, I'm immediately lightheaded and oh my gosh, but yeah, that was. I'll answer the question though. Why not? I'll do it with this way. So, and Joe's here. When we redid like Void Sake, Blue Door, Wild Lab, and Savs, we went in and said we're going to do this thing. It's only 7,000 square feet. It's no big deal. And I've told this story a couple of people before, but it became a big problem for some reason, even though it was zoned correctly. The building had been a vaguely similar use before, but because we were renovating it, we were mandated to redo the entire development plan. Okay. The whole, anybody's seen a development plan, it's massive. And it delayed the project. And when it came down the pipe, and after planning finally reviewed it with no opposition whatsoever, we were delayed 2 weeks because one person in planning said he found a typo after this huge process. Then it was delayed another 2 weeks because the person above him said, well, this line is a little thin. We need it to be thicker. So what we did, I'm glad nobody's listening to this, but what we did was when we first started the process, we closed over the windows and we started hammering. We went to work. Had we not done that, Joe would have been 6 months delayed. We're probably the first people that received our building permit and the next day got a CO on 7,000 square feet. We got damn good workers, guys. The reason I tell that story is because as it relates to urban service boundary, the city tells us, well, we support infill redevelopment. That's where we need to go. That story obviously shows that they do not. With the urban service boundary, it's, well, we need affordable housing. But, we're putting a blockade where you can't possibly go past this line. And if the city's not going to agree to these things, if it's no longer going to support adaptive reuse, infill redevelopment, that's fine. If it's not going to look at affordable housing, tell them, sorry, everything in Lexington is expensive, look elsewhere. Otherwise, we have to come up with a solution. And I'm not saying kill all the horses. That was, but it really needs to be seriously looked at of how this can be accomplished and done in a way that everybody is okay. It seems to be a massively divisive issue. everybody needs to sit at the same table and come up with a compromise. And then, boys, that's it. Let's head that direction. But right now, it's just too many opposing groups that are feeding their own information that's not always 100% above board. And I'd like to see the leaders and ultimately the mayor's office really step in and go, let's make this a conference. Anybody that's got a really dog in the fight, come on in and let's address this once and for all.
I think my good friend Ross has said before, I'm butchering the quote, but so I'm going to put words in your mouth. The line being a distraction to a certain extent. Talking about an imaginary line can sometimes be a distraction. It is very real. But until we have like the mentality as a city to kind of come to the table and have a conversation instead of being so focused on this one issue, that seems to be kind of like that awkward politics conversation with your uncle at Thanksgiving, that we're not going to get anywhere. So the hope is that we can like conversate about it.
Well, I will say too, just because since I am running for 12th District Council, I do not own a single commercial property in the 12th District, nor will I. But I think it still needs to be a conversation. So
yeah, exactly. So I think
a disclaimer.
I think having a conversation is exactly what you just said is really where we want to go with the whole discussion. Okay, we want to leave time for Q&A. We're running close on time. Is that fair to say?
33 minutes.
Great. Okay, awesome. I would say let's take Q&A unless we feel really passionate. Okay, well, actually, disclaimer too. Need to thank everybody for coming. One, need to thank these guys for doing the projects that they're doing, for coming out tonight. Walker Properties for sponsoring the event. Chad Needham for giving his time and also sponsoring an event that we did at the last time. I mean, DevelopLex does not happen without support. And it doesn't happen if we don't get to interview people. That's the other thing. So thank you guys for coming on. Any other thanks on the tour that we need to give? Great.
Thanks to you guys, man. It's like we're developers. We're behind the scenes. We get to be like a celebrity for 15 minutes. It's a cool thing. So it's also like nobody cares. Like we dug a hole today. All right, big deal.
Chad Needham was in a crawl space.
Yeah.
Awesome.